His audio is a little problem. It's
Yeah.
You just unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's echoing. Yeah. Okay, let's start the webinar. Very good evening. I, on behalf of CMS VATAVARAN, welcome you all on free online webinar series, Conservation Filmmaking, How to Make Films That Make a Difference. This is the chapter 2 of the CMS VATAVARAN webinar series on environmental filmmaking. And before introducing to these acclaimed filmmakers which are today with us, let me tell you a little about CMS VATAVARAN. Actually, CMS VATAVARAN is a Center for Media Studies is a think tank based in New Delhi, and CMS VATAVARAN is a part of Center for Media Study, and it's currently Asia's biggest wildlife and environmental festival. And during these lockdown period, we thought of doing something very creative so that people can be in their home and can use the time creatively. So we had done so many things during these days, like we had done a series of environmental online film festival. We are also organized 1 minute film festival, and now we are calling for 3-minute film festival. So we request all the filmmakers and film enthusiasts to participate in this 3-minute film festival and submit their entries. The subject is on biodiversity. Apart from that, the main CMS VATAVARAN Environmental Film Festival has also opened its call for entry for year 2021. And the films up to an hour of duration can be submitted online or through our website. So I request all of the filmmakers and the film students to participate in this main competitive section of CMS VATAVARAN. Before going further, I will like to play a small video about the different chapters of this webinar series. So can we have the video, please? This was a short introduction of the chapters which we are going to organize the webinar series on. So as I was saying that this online webinar is on conservation filmmaking, how to make films that make a difference. And we have with us some of the most acclaimed filmmakers and of India who are working in the field of conservation and wildlife and environmental filmmaking. And it's my pleasure to introduce one by one. We have Mr. Krishnendu Bose with us. Mr. Bose is a recipient of CMS UNEP Prithvi Ratna Award in 2009, and he's the founder director of Earthcare Films. And he's making films on wildlife conservation and environmental justice. and produced several international award-winning documentaries. In 2017, he got a national award for the best environmental film for his film The Tiger Who Crossed the Line. The film was also premiered on Discovery Channel in the same year. He is the founding member of ECO, the Earthcare Outreach Trust. ECO works with children and adolescents across the South Asia, empowering them with tools of filmmaking. He is also a visiting faculty to National School of Design. He is a nominated member of IUCN's Commission of Education and Communication. He has also served on the jury of National Film Awards. On behalf of CMS VATAVARAN, kindly accept our heartiest warm welcome, sir. We have Ms. Rita Banerji with us, a 2017 CMS National Geographic Ratna awardee. Ma'am's core work is environment films, communication strategy, and education and outreach, especially focused on wildlife and people, indigenous knowledge, and biodiversity. Since 2003, she is constantly producing a range of award-winning films on diverse subjects like turtle conservation, traditional fisheries, hunting of wild meat, and her film, The Wild Meat Trail, which we showcased in our online film festival a few weeks ago. It also won the Panda Award, also known as Green Oscar, in 2000. In 2015, she started the Green Hub project in Northeastern India in collaboration with Northeast Network. Green Hub is the first youth and community-based fellowship and digital archive for work related to wildlife, indigenous knowledge, and biodiversity. She was awarded the RBS Earth Hero Award in 2018 for contribution to environment conservation through films. Last but not the least, we have with us Aarti Shrivastava, a national award-winning Indian documentary filmmaker and Asia 21 leader. She began her career as with CNBC and subsequently worked as a researcher on an Australian documentary based on 2008 Mumbai attack, for directing her two award-winning documentaries, Land of Widows and White Nights, which were well received in the international festival circuit, including official nomination in 7th Al Jazeera International Documentary Film Festival, Doha 2011. In 2013, she directed her third documentary, Foresting Life, which won the national award. She has been a jury member on various film festivals, including the International Film Festival of India, Cebu International Documentary Film Festival in Philippines, IDPA Award for Excellence, Jaipur International Film Festivals, to name a few. And she is currently engaged in producing and directing a multi-year feature-length documentary project on water crisis in India. And Aarti is also going to moderate the session. So I will request Aarti to moderate the session and start this webinar. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Sabyasachi, for the introduction. I welcome Krishnendu Bose and Rita Banerji ma'am for this session. Krishnendu, to begin with, I'll just start the conversation with you about why do you feel creating awareness regarding environment and wildlife conservation is very crucial today, given the situation we are all in today. I mean, the kind of situation we are surrounded with COVID-19, and why do you feel that we need to really conserve what is with us, what is there with us?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the panel, CMS VATAVARAN, and hello to Aarti, you and Rita. Now you asked me a very simple question, but I think it's very complex. So let me just begin with the word conservation. And you said you're talking about environment and why should we protect it. I think these are very loaded terms. And as a practitioner of documentary filmmaking around conservation, environment, nature, wildlife, I just want to share my experiences in the last 30 years, how I have learned some of these very loaded terms. I think the word conservation is very complex. It depends on who you are. Now, if our society is kind of divided between, say, for instance, the people who are indigenous, right? They are inside the forest. Then you go move a step back, and then you talk about the community, the villagers who live around the forest. Then you take another step back and talk about the institutions, the NGOs, the scientists, the forest managers, the forest department, so that they become one unit. Then you step back again. Then you come to people like us who are urban people, city dwellers. And then you have another section who are probably corporates, maybe mining companies, or maybe even political class. So all these sectors or people, they have a different relationship with forest, environment, and conservation. For people, say indigenous people, their relationship is more of dependence, reverence, respect. For people or villagers who they draw, say, fuel and fodder for their livelihoods. So it is a kind of sustainable life and relationship they have. Now, probably at the edges, it's kind of becoming unsustainable. Then you have the managers who are into the whole practice of protection, and NGOs, they have their own notions of conservation. Then people like us, I feel we are more voyeuristic about nature. We want nature to give us peace, happiness, and adventure, and thrill, and wildlife, and photography. And then you have the political class and the corporates, who, to my mind, the primary way, the gaze towards conservation and towards forest is about extraction, right? Now, all these people, they talk about conservation. Everybody talks about conservation. No one will say don't cut, no one will say cut trees or deforestation is good. No one will say that. But you can imagine everyone out here have a different relationship. So when you ask me, what do I think about conservation and how it is important? For a filmmaker or communicator like us, it's important to know where you're standing, on whose behalf you're talking about, and what is your agency, right? Now, if I say I'm an activist, for instance, and I want to make a film which is, or my communication is sort of a slightly strident communication, slightly, say, difficult to digest, for instance. Now, a Discovery or BBC or Nat Geo will never let me make that film, right? Or if I am a little critical of the mining companies or even the political class, if I got a film from the government to make or a CSR money, they will never allow me to do that. So who is talking? What is my agency as a communicator? What are the boundaries? What are the lines? What are the limits of communication? So I feel it's really a very simple question, but very complicated. So I just wanted to put the context in place. Maybe Rita can, or you, if you want me to go ahead and answer your question.
Rita, I'll just give the same question to you. I mean, what does conversation mean to you? Because, you belong to the Northeast, and Northeasterns have a deep connection between forest and themselves. Like, they are really interconnected. So they actually have everything related. I mean, they are actually surrounded by forest, and everything around them, their rituals, their culture, everything revolves around forest and the environment. How would you put the term conservation in place for us?
So actually, Aarti, adding to what Krishnendu is saying, I think the first thing is to really understand the word conservation. Because what we typically do is, as soon as the word conservation comes, we think of forest and rivers. That actually conservation is a much larger umbrella which is surrounding all of us. I think first thing which we need to do, especially if they're young filmmakers and young people, is to really understand that when we're talking about conservation, it touches each one of us. It's not an external thing that you have to go to the Northeast for conservation or you have to go to a forest for conservation. You have to start becoming, I mean, it has to be in your bloodstream almost. You have to start getting conscious of the water you're drinking, to the food you're eating, to the clothes you're wearing, to the vehicle you're running. I mean, conservation is all about that. Where is the water coming from? which river is it coming from, which glacier is it coming from, and then it reaches Delhi. So I feel it's very important first to understand conservation as a very deep idea that we are all living in. And I think earlier it may have been that we are making films about conservation and all that, but to understand it deeply is the first thing. And I think the COVID-19 has, it's not rocket science, we all know about forests and rivers, but after COVID-19, I think it's very clear that everybody needs to understand conservation in a way where you understand that you have a role to play. So that's what I like to add to what Krishnendu is saying. It is about really, really getting it into your system. That it's not an external concept. It is you. That would be the first step, I would say.
Okay, Krishnendu, when you started making films on conservation, which was the first film that you made? How did you ideate, and how did it all come together, and it was made into a beautiful film? Could you share that example with our students who are attending this session, so that they understand from where you actually ideated the concept to how it became into a wonderful film which was used for conservation action? Krishnendu, I can't hear.
I'm sorry. I muted it. I'm saying it will take me back to 25 years. I made my first film in 93, 92, 93. And I'm a student of economics. I'm a postgraduate from Delhi School of Economics. So I was very interested in agriculture and Green Revolution particularly, and the fallouts of Green Revolution. When I left my college in the intermediate years, about 3, 4, 5 years, when I was still learning the ropes of filmmaking, I was in the zone of Green Revolution, post-Green Revolution, the whole contamination of soil and water in Punjab, Haryana. It was a big thing at this point of time. And then I got to make 2 films by Intac about Green Revolution and its fallout, and natural farming and organic farming. So it was a project for about 2 years. And that, I think, set the base for me from my education to filmmaking, to talking to farmers, living on organic farms. And as Rita said, understanding how you are involved in the environment, as it were, because we have been taught the language which has always been used for conservation. It's out there. You have to save the trees, save the water, clean the air, as if it's all outside of us. So I learned my first lessons that the food you're eating, that's the first connection you make apart from breathing the air and drinking the water. And where is your food coming from? So I made these 2 films called Revolution and After and The Good Earth, 2 parts. And yeah, so I think, yeah, that's it. Yeah. I don't know whether they were wonderful films or not, as you described them, but it was certainly wonderful for me, because those are my first films, and I learned the ropes, not only of filmmaking, but also of environment and how to place yourself in the environment.
Rita, you have actually made a lot of films which also tackled conservation in a very different way, which talked about livelihoods. Now, keeping in mind about, the kind of geography we are living in, around 60% of the occupation are directly or indirectly related to nature-based, occupations. So livelihood somewhere plays a very important role in this whole thing, and you really need to conserve you have to really think about conservation from a point of view of supporting like around 60% of the economy, which is based indirectly or directly on nature-based economy.
So I think, Aarti, it's an interesting question, because, to really, I think we need to really look at what is the definition of livelihood, or what is the definition of economy as such. So, if we look at the larger context, we are constantly looking at the development model as what is being touted, like, the corporate jobs and the way in the city and things like that. But a lot of contribution to our Indian economy is based on the rural livelihoods, or, traditional fish workers or indigenous ways of living. And I think that contribution is not really accounted for. So I think we need to understand the contribution of small farmers. Like Krishnendu was saying, we need to understand the contribution of traditional fish workers. We need to understand the contribution of forest fringe communities in the way they contribute to the larger economy. I mean, today, those are the livelihoods which actually, if you look at it now, those are the livelihoods which we need to enhance for the future. Because the kind of unsustainability which is there in the regular way of living, the way we are going, I think looking at the migrant labor situation in India, I mean, you can't help but think that I think these answers have been there, but now one has to really work towards those things. So I think in India, if you're coming back to films, I think it's very difficult to make films which are isolated with wildlife, or people. When you're making wildlife films or environment films, all the spaces merge. Every landscape in India, whether it's the turtles, you have the fish workers. Whether it's the tiger, you have them sharing it with indigenous communities. You have leopards around urban areas. So in India, it's very difficult to separate the two. So, I think that's what all these films are about. You're always trying to explore more, getting your facts more in place, and trying to, through that, to see where the solutions are, which people are talking about. Yeah.
And could you please share any film that you made which really made some impact on the society at a grassroots level, which actually changed some policies or made decision makers to think about what is going on? Could you please give us an example for us to really understand what these conservation films really mean in a larger picture? I mean, they don't really make a big noise, but they really make bigger impact.
I think there are two different kinds of films. We did a film when I was still in Riverbank Studios, which is in 2000. I think we came out with a film called The Shores of Silence, which was based on the killing of whale sharks on the Indian coast. And whale sharks are the largest fish in the ocean. And I think we spent a lot of time making it, and it was very clear that whale shark killing was not a sustainable practice. I mean, they would have disappeared because it's a large fish. And at the same time, people's livelihood wasn't dependent on the killing of the fish. So I think the film itself was, I think one cannot say like, it was a catalyst, you can say, I think films always play the role of a catalyst, and that film led directly to other people joining in and working on the policy, and it was put under the Wildlife Protection Act. That was the first fish which was put under the Wildlife Protection Act. And it's now one of the biggest conservation stories. And there are a lot of people who are involved with it. So the film was like the starting point. So that was like a big learning that video and films can play a big role. While the film which won the Panda Award, The Wild Meat Trail, was a different kind of film which brought out the extent of hunting of wildlife in the Northeast. But it wasn't a black and white story because there are a lot of layers in it. And it wasn't something where you could just make a film and sit back and say, okay, hunting is going to stop. It's a film which needed you to understand a lot about communities' relationship with the landscape. And I think it was just a first step in pushing us in the direction of working with the community here and starting what we are doing now, the Greener Project. The Wild Meat Trail was the first step in that direction.
So I just
add
to what Rita said. I think the role of films and the way it plays out, I don't think it kind of overnight changes stuff. It is not meant to. Of course, there have been films like Mike's film on whale sharks, and I think Shekhar had done some work which helped Kudremukh in Karnataka to stop mining. And there have been instances like that. But as she said, it's a catalyst. But what films do, I think more importantly, it's a slow burner. It slowly changes the mindset. It's repeated screenings. It's talking to people about things which they didn't know. And there is a volume, like if there are 100 filmmakers making these kind of films, which leads you to think or rethink rather of given positions in the society about conservation, environment, and you just shuffle it across. you know, and then slowly there is a public opinion built. I mean, I've always wanted to do this film, for instance, during the month of September, October, November in Delhi, a 2-minute film on air pollution, and a shocking film. And that might change a few things around, but if I do it ever. So, but that is those are very few and far, you know, like a student, a young boy of a 19-year-old boy, he once came to me I was doing a screening of one of my films called There's a Fire in Your Forest. And he came and he said that you changed my life. I said, oh, wow, how did I do it? So he said, I wanted always to get into wildlife studies, and I want to go to WII, and I want to become a scientist. And I saw a couple of your films. Now I am doing MA in environment studies because I have understood it's a much larger thing. Wildlife is just a part of it. Now, I don't know where this boy has gone and what has he done. But if your films kind of talk to several young people, several older people maybe, and they are at least talking amongst themselves or with themselves that, well, oh, we thought that tigers are supposed to be only inside forest. Oh my God, there are tigers outside also. They go to the villages in the night. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, so there is a conversation which has started, and films just do that.
So my next question is, like, you know, a lot of scientists are saying that, you know, due to climate impact, we are going to face a lot of, I mean, this is going to be something recurrent. So it's going to happen over the time. Like, you know, we'll face a lot of viruses, and we will be faced with a lot of problems. And these last 2-3 months have been a good net practice for all of us to really think about what we need to do and how we really need to change ourselves to coexist with the nature around us. And, you know, we really need to bring the element of nature and environment into our lives so that we beautifully coexist. What are your thoughts when you think about coexisting, and what, you know, for the youth, basically, if I must say, for youth, what message do you have that, you know, they should really start thinking towards when you talk about, you know, changing your life pattern a little bit? What kind of changes they should really think and make in these couple of months, so that, you know, we also kind of think about environment as a part of our lives?
You're asking me?
Yes, I mean.
Okay. So maybe we should go back a little bit and understand what kind of life are we living right now and why. I think, you know, things have really changed. Since I started filmmaking 30 years ago, I've been in that change, and I've got kids, so I see the next generation, and the change is so fast. The speed at which we are hurtling towards God knows where, it's so fast that we didn't get a pause to think. And now in the last 2.5, 3 months, I think the whole world has got a pause to think. And what has happened is the technology, the speed, communication, everything, I feel, this is my personal opinion, everything has kind of broken that cord or the link we had with environment. And it hasn't happened in the 30 years. It's been going on for a long time. Maybe from the, you know, as we say, Anthropocene, maybe from the Industrial Revolution, or certainly in the 20th century. But the speed at which it has happened post World War II, you know, the whole industrialization, and last 20, 25, 30 years. So you have to understand the bridges are broken, the threads are broken. So now to tell a young man or young woman that go and reconnect in the next 3 months is going to be impossible. So what I would imagine or hope, that this situation, which has been thrown at us from nowhere, however, it is not nowhere, it is building up, and we've had climate change warnings, climate change evidence all our lives, but somehow we've kind of, you know, just sidelined it. And this has actually made us stop right there and think. So if you're asking me what is to be done, I think this can be changed into an opportunity, however sad this statement might sound. But we need to recalibrate and reconstruct our relationship with nature. We even need to understand and mend those broken bridges. I think we need to, you know, go back to ourselves and think how unsustainable our lives have become. and whether we can take small baby steps for this reconnection. We can talk about it later. I think this is going to be a dominant discussion today. So maybe Rita would like to take that forward.
So adding to what Krishnendu saying and your question about the youth, so it's what I've seen over the last, I think the youth right now have to play a very important role in, bringing awareness. I mean, it's not about us bringing awareness to them. I think this generation is much more aware about environment and what is happening around. And last 2 to 3 months since the lockdown, I mean, if we look at the Northeast, the Deheng Patkai, the Bang Valley, if you see the voices which have been raised, along with other people, the youth have played a huge role in raising the concerns. And, they're really good at, there's the other side of technology where they're really good at using social media, Instagram, Facebook. And it's been so fascinating to see, whether it's the Northeast, whether it's other parts of India, Karnataka, Goa, where so many forest clearances have been given. It's been one of the most beautiful creative movements which the youth they're using music, they're using art, they're using things like Twitter storm, which we didn't even know there was a storm like that. So I think they can play a very strong role. They're much more aware, they're much more savvy. I think what they need to do is what Krishnendu was saying right in the beginning, is to really become aware and go on the ground and see what is happening around you. So if you're living in Karnataka, you should understand Western Ghats and the value of that and how is your life linked to it. If you're living in the Northeast, you have to understand what Deheng Patkai is. It's a beautiful rainforest. What is Dibang Valley? So I think, and they are playing that role. So I would say it's a fantastic time, and it is a time which can either change things, or I don't think we have an option of going back leading our lives the old way, because it's not like we can say we have to leave things for our children. The time has already come. The urgency to do things has come. So let's see. But they have a strong role to play in that, to enable that.
Yes. Rita, you started with Green Hub, this whole movement since the last 5 years. You've been, training fellows in the Northeast area. And I think you've trained a lot of filmmakers in the Northeast, and they are making some beautiful films. And there are films coming from the Northeast, which talks about Deheng Patkai, which talks about Dibang Valley. They are using these little tools to make beautiful films. Could you please tell us a little about the movement that you created and which is gaining?
I'll just correct that. The films which you're seeing on the campaign are made by youth from all over. That has nothing to do with Green Hub as such. Those are made by people from Arunachal, by people from Assam and things like that. We have a very different, it's not a movement, it's a fellowship program. So what we are doing is it's a fellowship program where 20 youth join us every year from remote parts of the Northeast. And they are with us for 1 year, where we use video as a tool for them to engage with conservation. So the training process is pretty intense, where resource people from all over India come and take workshops with the fellows over the first 3 months. And then there's an internship with different organizations working with the Northeast, including the Forest Department, including other NGOs, small organizations, universities, where they work with them and do short films. And the mentorship, because the resource people are from all across, the exposure level they get through making a film is much higher. Like Krishnendu is also one of the mentors, and it's something which is, so what we're doing is using video as a tool of conservation. So when you use a camera, it's a very fascinating thing, because you start looking at things, you start looking at a bird more carefully. Or if you're talking about human elephant conflict, you have to actually go and shoot it. So your learning is based on the field work. So that's what we are doing. So, yeah.
Yes, Krishnendu, would you like to add something about training youth, because you also been doing a lot of training program with ECO, if I'm not wrong. So would you like to tell us about that a little?
Sorry. ECO is Earthcare Outreach Trust. It started about 10 years ago, 2010. And the reason why it started was that after being a practitioner for about 2 decades, I realized that there was some gaps as a documentary filmmaker from the urban areas, just so I felt I go into a setting, say a forest, and talk to communities, interview them. So however sensitive or politically correct I am or try to be, I'm still representing somebody's voice, and it cannot be real. So of course I realize that there is a value of the kind of films we make as trained professionals, but also we need to hear from the people their own experience in their own voice, and also in a communication which they own and which they decide how and why to do it. So that kind of prompted us to experiment with participatory video, which is a form which has been around in the world and in India for a long time. So we borrowed that form and we started working with young adults. And the experience was absolutely mind-boggling for me. I by that time, I thought I knew about filmmaking a little bit. And, and the next 10 years, the kind of stuff which was unpacked for me was completely mind-blowing, even from the side of the clients or the people who partnered with us, who asked us to make those films. It was very interesting because some of them would call me and say that we want to make films about sustainability. And we are working with children of Sundarbans and Kanha and things like that. And so you are a known filmmaker, so we want you to make some films about sustainability and show it to them. So, well, that's great. Thank you very much. But should we ask them, have we talked to them about sustainability? They are Adivasi children, they are people, children or living in Sundarbans, they may have a very rich experience. So have we asked them? No, we haven't asked them. But, we have those set of things and we should. So I said, well, why don't we work with them and ask them their notion of sustainability? And then started these series of films. And it was fantastic because we would train them for about a week. And of course, and Rita would know that filmmaking is very easy, very simple. Only filmmakers, we mystify this whole process so that we want to make ourselves very important, but it's a very simple process. So we would train them a little bit, and they would go out with the camera, they would write the script, and the kind of stuff which was come out, it's amazing. And I would actually ask, do you really think this is what you want to make? I'll just narrate a very short story, very, very short story, if you have the time. In Sagar Islands, the largest island in Sundarbans, I'm talking about 2010-12. So you had to take a boat and get into that island. But when we went there, there was this whole plan, and a lot of money had come in for power to come. There was no electricity there, so power to come in. A bridge was being made from Calcutta, so cars would roll in. So that was the period of time. So the bunch of 12 kids in a government school, aged between 11 and 15, they decided to make a film which would say no to this development. My God, I said, hello, this is a very political film you are trying to make. Are you sure? He said, yeah, we are very sure. We don't want outsiders to come in and take away our lands. And that's exactly what this 12-year-old boy said. And it's in the film as well. So, and this is what some of the films I was making. And then these kids in a village, they are trying to make this film and then made it. And, so giving voice to the people who already have the voice and the ideas and the vision and the experience, I think it's fantastic. And then moving on from young adults, we also worked with women of Uttarakhand and older people. So it's been a very interesting. So I feel this tool, if it can be used, Rita is doing somewhat similar things with young people of the Northeast. Because what Rita is doing, you're talking to people, you're training people from the area. So they're local people talking about local issues. So they have a stake in it. Me going to Arunachal or Assam talking about that, I'm a communicator, so I'm talking to the rest of the world. But I have a stake in a larger way, larger world, but I don't have an immediate stake in it. but these guys would have an immediate stake. The people we had worked through ECO, they have an immediate stake. So it's a very interesting sort of experience we've had.
Okay. For all the people who are watching this webinar, we will be taking online questions. So if you have any questions, you can just leave it in the message box and we shall address those questions. Coming back to our conversation. So when you talk about, making films, how important is it to collaborate with the grassroots level organizations and do partnerships with the locals and make films, which makes a much bigger, impact on the people? So how important it is to collaborate with the people on grounds and, organizations and partner with them?
I think more than collaboration for any film, that's a rule for any film you're making on conservation. I feel conservation films can be anything. It can be a natural history film also. It could be human and people also, but humans and wildlife also. But the core thing is that you have to research it. Research the topic which you have to go on the ground. Whatever film you're making, you have to find out the facts from the people, from the researchers who are working on it, if there are government agencies involved, if there are other stakeholders. First thing is, for understanding that subject, you have to research it. So if it's about wildlife and you're making it on a particular species, you have to really know their role in the ecosystem. If it's about traditional fish workers, you have to understand the nets they're using, the boats they're using. As a filmmaker, you have to do that research. So I think that is the core thing for anybody getting into conservation filmmaking or wildlife filmmaking. Before you start, you have to get deep in your understanding first, and then spend time. Don't be in a rush to make a film. Don't be in a rush to make a quick film and send it out, and it's not about that. You have to persevere, be on the ground, spend time in the field, and then make that film. That's where the story is. Ultimately, it's about the story, and your story will never come out unless you spend that time on the ground. So that is what I would tell anybody who's starting out.
Yes, Krishnendu, would you like to add something?
I just wanted to add a little thing, especially for documentary filmmakers and the kind of films we make in rural areas close to forests. I think it's also a matter of trust. When you're going into a community, you are an outsider, you're a foreigner, and you want people to bear their lives in front of your camera. Why would they do it? They don't know me. I have no credibility. I may have got national awards and international awards. For them, it doesn't mean anything. So either I stay there for 3 months and let them know me, or, which is often not possible, or go in with trusted people. So they trust them, and by sort of, you are partnered with them and they know them. So those are the ways to break into a community. And it's a very kind of a research tool. It's a very sort of given research tool. And that's how you gain trust. And then, you get somewhat opinions, expressions, experience sharing for your film.
And I'll add to what Krishnendu is saying. So as a filmmaker, when you go in, a lot of the work we do is not just behind the camera and shooting. There's a lot of networking involved. There's a lot of people skills you need. Like what you were saying about getting trust, you really have to spend time, and you cannot get away from that. A lot of times you're just getting permissions to shoot somewhere, and the amount of time I think filmmakers spend in offices or in people's houses, or, so there's a lot of aspects to it which are involved, and one should be willing to do it. So that part is very important for any filmmaker. Don't feel that you can just go and start. Spend that time, spend that rigor, spend that time in the field.
I think also you should be a good tea drinker. You have to have umpteen number of cups of tea, and sometimes, also salted tea. So you should practice all this.
Yes. Krishnendu, you said that, filmmaking is a very easy process, and, you have spent so much of time doing this. Could you please share your, skill, little bit of skills with our students who are watching this webinar, for them to understand how they can really become good filmmakers and, make good films, which makes a better future?
So I'll just narrate a little story, how we begin our workshops. with rural children. So there is a whiteboard and I keep writing, what are the things which is important, which you need to make a film? So people keep saying that we need money, we need cameras, we need technicians, we need a location. So we keep listing it. And then somebody from behind says, we need a story. So I write that. And then I throw it open to all the kids that what is the most important thing in this? So they think and they say, it's a story. So filmmakers come from Delhi to your village because you have the story. I don't have the story. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come all the way. So this is something people need to understand. Whoever wants to get into filmmaking, they need to understand you may have the most fancy camera, you may have the most fancy people, experienced people behind the camera, but the ultimate thing is the story. So if you can tell a good story and an important story which clinches the hearts of people. I've seen films which are terribly shot. You know, I had difficulty in sitting through the film first 10 minutes. And then you get sucked into the film and then gets the first prize in that international film competition. And then you realize that, well, it could have been, I'm not sort of suggesting that just go and run and make a film because story is important. Of course, you need to get your technology and your techniques right. I don't want to see a shabby, shoddy film, but where is the story? So this is something you have to get, and you have to, like Rita said, you have to research it, spend all your time. Like we spend all our time on the script, on the story, on characters, who is saying what. And then this whole filmmaking process, the filming and the editing is perhaps, I think, 30 to 40% of the entire time.
Okay. Rita, so we'll just take the last question and then we'll move on to question and answers, and we'll try to address those questions. Rita, you have trained a lot of fellows, you know, in the last 5 years, I mean, somewhere around 80 to 100 fellows you have already trained. Could you please give us could you tell us little about what they are doing now, which makes you happy that, you know, this training had taken place and good that you have done it, like the kind of impact these people have gone out and are making in the world, which makes you really happy. So could you tell us a few examples of these students?
Yeah, so I think, Aarti, we have 88 fellows now. And I think what I was saying was that we use video as a tool for transforming minds. One is to make films and, you know, make those films with local stories, local narratives. But then most of the fellows do belong to indigenous communities, do belong to areas where you still have community forests. They are from different parts of like Nagaland, Assam, Mizoram. All these areas are very important, where it's very important to protect the biodiversity of that. And so many of the fellows, almost 90% of them, are still engaged with conservation related work, either by working with the community directly or by making films or working with NGOs or even freelancing. So some of the like there's this boy Vanmay, he's a Konyak, he's from Mon district, a place called Changlangshu, and in their community hunting is still there. And he came to Green Up more to learn film because he had used the video. He's a fantastic filmmaker, like a natural talent actually. Many of them come with such talents that it's amazing. But after spending the time here, he felt that he needs to work with his community and start this whole dialogue on conservation. And he's now working very closely with his community. He's formed a biodiversity management committee. He selected a part of their area. There the deforestation is more because of shifting cultivation. And there's a lot of water problem now, but that's the way the traditional agriculture is. So while continuing that, he's, you know, has blocked one area for restoration. There's another girl called Surly Born who started a youth collective in her area in Karbi Anglong. So there's several of them who are working in remote areas of where we won't have access to, but they're working directly with the community, while there are others who are working. So yeah, for me, the happiness is that there's a network of youth across the Northeast who are now becoming the change makers themselves in their own community. You know, and hopefully over time, this network is what will, you know, transcend borders, transcend identities and actually maybe help communities to move towards the same goal of conservation. So it's still a beginning, I would say, but it's like I said, when you see the youth, you just see that you become the catalyst and you see how they take over things, and it's just that you just give them that seed and they become the change makers.
I completely understand.
So that
yes, and for films like environmental films and conservational films, platforms like CMS Vatavaran and film festivals really play a very important role in terms of screenings and traveling festivals. So what do you feel about that? What kind of an impact these kind of festivals really have on films which are environmental and conservational?
Krishnendu, you.
Okay. Yeah, as in the beginning I said, films are catalysts for conversations. So festivals like CMS Vatavaran and other film festivals are great because they bring people, they bring viewers, they bring people who are experts, they make them meet. It creates a kind of hub of conversation, and films are the catalyst for that. So yeah, I mean, especially the traveling festival, I've been in a couple of these traveling screenings of my films with Vatavaran. And so the questions again are very, very different, very interesting questions. If you're showing a film based in, say, Assam, in Assamese language, and if you are screening in Guwahati or Tezpur in some university, so the questions you will get from that audience will be very different than you screen in IISc in Delhi. And I think that audience for me is more important. And you create a local conversation with local issues. So I think it's invaluable, the film festivals. Yeah.
Rita, would you like to add a little here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact is there's such few platforms for festivals, for documentary films, and especially, like I was saying, environment and wildlife is still an external this thing. So such few platforms. There's even the mainstream television does not have slots for environment films, or documentaries are so tough for people to see. So something like Vatavaran plays a big role, I think, for filmmakers also to show their films, also for all of us to meet and share our work with each other. There's so much of cross learning because of that. Like if I talk about what we are doing, it's because all of us have met during these festivals and become friends and shared our work, and then we are working as a collective for everything. So festival does play a big role in that, and traveling festivals are as important because they travel to the small towns and they show those films. And now, like the online screenings which you are having, which is a new way we are all learning to this thing, the viewership even becomes larger. So so to facilitate that, I think it's very important to have something like Vatavaran. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just take a few questions which are in the inbox now. The first question is from Richa Johri. She says conservation films are mostly controversial, as mentioned by Krishnendu sir. They may not be supported by funding agencies, hence most of them would be self-funded. So I would like to know what are the hindrances in making such films and who are the takers. Such films most of the times have limited reach, whereas they are supposed to be reached out to most largest of audiences. What are the real-time struggles? Thank you. So could you please address that, Krishnendu sir, for us?
Yeah, I mean, just to correct a little, I didn't say that conservation films are controversial necessarily. It depends on where you're standing and what kind of films do you want to make. My films have run into sort of hot waters sometimes, yeah. But well, I would say that you need to choose your funders. First of all, you need to choose what kind of film do you want to make with all those riders and all those parameters which I talked in the beginning. And then who is going to support you? Because I feel there are various slots for various kinds of films. Like if you go to, say, OTTs, or if you go to those international wildlife channels, they would look at a particular thing. That's purely for entertainment and maybe infotainment a little bit, but they need a certain kind of film, which will keep your adrenaline going and you're getting inside and thrills and, all that kind of stuff, which is fine with me. But then there are NGOs who, if your values and your ideas match with theirs, so you can partner with them and make films. And then there is, as you said, as she said, there is self-funding where you can't find any takers. It's difficult. So that's as far as funding goes. But screening now, especially as Rita said, online is fantastic, absolutely. Because I remember we struggled so much, with VHS cassettes. And every time a person would ask me, where can I see your films? I used to hide myself. I just say, excuse me, I'm just going to the washroom. Because I didn't know what to do with this guy. And now we can give links, Vimeo links, and you can have a website. And so many people like VATAVARAN, they're doing festivals. So I think that is kind of taken care of. Where would you like to show your films?
Sure.
But still there will be censorships. Possibly you still have to find that slot where all the films will be shown. But yeah, I mean, things are much better. So you have funders, you can find your funders, and you can find those slots, maybe OTTs or television, or you can find those slots to screen your film. So don't worry, just go ahead and do what you want to do. There'll be supporters, there'll be collaborators, there'll be partners.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There's another question. Rita, I would like you to answer this. It's from Berry Mosisa. She's asking, what is the main difference between conventional films and conservation films?
Conventional films and conservation films.
I
don't know really.
Yes.
I don't know really, but see, it's very, where we talk about conservation films, mostly, like if I use the last term, it's linked to environment. It's linked to environment largely. Within the environment, you can be talking about wildlife alone. You can be talking about wildlife and people. You can be just talking about a habitat, but mostly looking at the issues around conservation. So mostly you're working like that. So for example, just to give examples to make it clearer, if it's about one of the films I did was called Right to Survive. So it's about the traditional fish workers and the olive ridley turtles, and finding out whether they are in line with conservation. So that is there. Anything to do with Krishnendu's made it on human and elephant conflict. So many films on that. So mostly conservation films are looking at that. Ultimately, it's the story. Ultimately, it's the story. It's what we tend to do is we sometimes define conservation films as the ones which make an impact in terms of issues. Like we talk about conservation films as the ones which bring up issues, which mostly we have done. And then you have the natural history films, which are only about the wild, But I think over time, one has also realized that those films also have an impact, because there are many people who get into conservation because they fall in love with wildlife when they fall. So I think, but I don't know about conventional films and conservation films.
Bollywood, what does she mean? Bollywood?
Yeah, I think. All right. So the next question here is, how do we educate kids of this generation? Also keeping in mind, that there is about 65% of the population is below 35 years of age. If you really see Indian population demographics. So I just wanted to also add that thing here, that how do you really train these youngsters and children and, youth to basically take up conservation in a bigger way and, train them? I mean, what kind of studies we need to have from the childhood itself? We really need to change how we learn things about environment and nature. I mean, that needs to be in the curriculum. So what kind of changes you really feel that should be made in the curriculum? I mean, for children, for college students, and where are we lacking? So this is something that I just made 2-3 questions together. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very large, very broad question, as you understand. So
Yes.
I can pick up some strands and talk about it. From my experience, I have gone into classrooms like in Delhi, in Mumbai, in big cities, and started a little conversation with children. And then the first statement I would make is cutting trees is not bad. So it will immediately startle people. The teachers and the principal would be very angry with me that why is he talking nonsense? Then, you know, the discussion will go on to, you have to understand who's cutting the trees, how many trees are being cut, and why are they cut? And is it a corporate which is coming and clearing 400 square kilometers of trees, whether it is an indigenous person who's lopping branches, not even cutting trees? So as a blanket, cutting trees or you know, is bad, and planting trees is good. This is bad, this is good. I mean, I think this is the first thing. If you, like you're saying, that if you want to train yourself as a conservation environment filmmaker, first you need to train yourself as a conservation environment person. You need to dismantle these blocks which have been trained right from the time you are growing. You go into school and you have been told a few things, and you need to unlearn these. I feel it's very strong words, but unlearn some of the things. And if you get a chance, like Rita also said, you need to visit these places. And one very important word, I don't know if it will come up, and we are nearing the end of this session. There is a word I think we should keep telling ourselves, especially in a post-COVID world, is listen. We need to listen. We need to listen to the forest. We need to listen to the tiger. We need to listen to the indigenous people. We need to listen to the, you know, to the environment. We are not listening. In the last many years, we've just stopped listening. We are just doing things. Our cockiness, our aggression has stopped making us listen. So if you want to be that person, environmentally conscious person, you need to listen.
And I think just adding to that, what you were saying about our education system, I think what we, coming back to the earlier discussion, that we always look at environment as something external. So a lot of the conservation educators, what they're constantly trying is to make it part of every subject the kid is learning, right from childhood. You know, so whether you're learning geography, whether you're learning science, whether you're doing history, environment has to be integrated in the learning process. And that's a big difference between what is happening in India and what is many of the countries abroad, like especially some of the kids I've seen, primary, really small kids, they learn by, you know, really understanding a frog, looking at the environment around you. So we may know the map of the world, but we may not know the map around our colony, you know, or the trees going around our colony. So I think environment has to be made part of each subject, so it doesn't become an external thing. And that is a change the education system has to bring in. And yes, then the larger things of other tools can be used. But if you want a large scale behavior change, it has to be part of schools in a deeper way.
Okay. Our audience really needs to, wants to know what kind of documentaries Krishnendu sir and Rita ma'am are making now. So if you could tell us a little about what kind of films you are focusing on and what kind of conservation work is keeping you busy during these COVID times.
Rita can start. Let me think what I'm doing.
Well, you know, I've been, my entire time has been taken by the Green Hub project, because it's quite an intense thing. We have 24 fellows, we have a whole group of alumni, and they are spread across the Northeast. So many, because of that, we also get to know what is happening in those areas. So I think one of the things we are trying to focus on, because they're all fellows who can make films, we are trying to see how to generate a lot of local stories from the places where these guys are, and kind of relate it to give it context in terms of COVID, because a lot of it, if we look at all the studies which are coming out, nature is a big part of what has happened with COVID, right? And all the scientists and all the researchers, what they're saying is that if we don't go back to nature, this kind of situation will happen again. It's kind of predicted.
Yes.
So so through short films, through our fellows, through our alumni, we are trying to see how we can generate a lot of short stories which can build a lot of narrative around it, a lot of local information around it. Maybe look at the value systems which the indigenous communities have, which we can learn from, and learn from other people who have come back from cities. So trying to build a whole gamut of video stories. myself, I'm doing more management than making films.
Interesting. Really interesting. Krishnendu, sir, what about you? What's keeping you busy? And your
Oh,
upcoming project?
I don't know if they're upcoming or not, but we are trying to do some research on few projects. One is on the floods in Upper Bihar, in North Bihar, because there is a lot of interesting conversations around floods for many years. So we are trying to look at the human sort of face of the floods and the dikes and the dams which have been built. So that's one film we are trying to do research on. And the other couple of films, it's not films, but it's about people's experiences and conservation experiences in Kaziranga with the rhinos, the community, and Sundarbans. We are working, trying to work with people there and trying to figure out what are their experiences of conservation around Sundarbans and Kaziranga. So these are 2 or 3 projects we are just kind of working on. Let's see how long we'll have to wait to actually get out.
Okay. Could you please tell us a little about, what kind of topics students can pick up and do films around, short films around, various issues during these times, during lockdown? What kind of issues they really can focus on? What kind of, topics they can pick up, and without wasting any time, they can use their mobile phones and, do some short films. So how would you like to guide them?
I think, there's a lot of things you can observe around you, so if you're in an urban landscape, even a simple thing like Story of a Tree. One of the most beautiful films I've seen is something called Queen of Trees, which was about a fig tree, and these filmmakers followed it through the year of how a tree gives so much life to things. So if you have an urban area, if you have a window to look out from, even a story of the life around a tree is great. It could be also looking at what's happening with the migrant labor. I mean, if some people haven't been able to go back home, everything, if you look at it, has a story of environment linked to it. That person has also come from a faraway village, is working in a city, and is not being able to go back. So the stories around that, you have to keep yourself safe, so you can't really, so those things you have to keep in mind. So a lot of things are limiting, but I think since we can't travel too much, to look out for stories around you, maybe even talk to your parents and talk about their time, how things used to be. Like even if I think of our growing up, we never used plastic because plastic wasn't there that time. The thela wala with the vegetables would come outside the house. We would buy the vegetables. Plastic was hardly used because plastic hadn't come in then. But we took those things for granted. Milk cans used to be used for milk. So gather stories from your parents, from the elders, and there's so much knowledge which is there already. So I think first thing is to look around you. There's stories all over. So talk to your parents, talk to your elders, look outside the window, maybe explore where the water in your tap is coming from, or look at the label on the food which you're having. Go through Google, and maybe you can do a whole film on Google, like searching things on the Google. So it's a time where you have time to really understand environment,
Krishnendu sir, would you like to add something?
No, I think it's very well said. Just turn the camera onto yourself and the people you live with, your family, and look into the in-between spaces. Like Rita said, just pick up that bottle and look at the label. And in fact, it's very interesting. Our personal experience has been such that we have a terrace on our house, and we have time. And my son is 18 years old. He's in the last year of the school, and he wants to become a photographer. So both of us, actually, we did an entire short film on the birds on our terrace. And we found a pair of sunbirds which were nesting. And we kind of, sequenced the entire nesting, including the chicks coming out and the parents feeding it. So it was a great experience though it's not new to me, at least, to see even my son we've photographed birds, but in a closed kind of environment on our terrace, and these birds must be coming every year. It's not that suddenly lockdown and birds have descended on our terrace. It's just that we didn't have the time to pause and look and even bring out our lenses and film it. So it's an amazing, and I think what Rita said was very important. What she said earlier was to integrate environment in your daily life. That was the education system should be all about. And then when you talk to your parents and talk about plastics, I really love that example. And
yes,
so,
it was really interesting.
yeah, I mean, you suddenly realize that, well, certain things, a lot of things we take for granted in our lives today, how did it come? And when did it come? And why did it come? So these are the questions if you ask yourself and just record it on a camera, I think you'll have great content.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing this lovely example with your son that you just did.
I
I'm
can
sure.
share the film with you guys.
Yes,
I can share the film with VATAVARAN.
yes, please do that. Please do that. Also, now keeping in mind that we don't really know what's going to unfold in the next couple of months, and how filmmakers will be able to kind of get funding for films, because the economy is hit really badly, and I don't know how filmmakers will be able to fund themselves and continue their work, because a lot of CSR funding is not going to be there. A lot of funding is not going to be there for the filmmakers. What do you suggest for such filmmakers, and what opinion or what kind of feedback do you want to give to filmmakers who will be left without funding and who really want to make good films?
I think funding for filmmakers is always very tough. They're used to this. And it's not a new thing right now.
It's getting tougher.
So, we are always struggling for funds. It becomes a way of life for you. But I think one thing is obviously to look after yourself right now. And it's a very important thing for you to look after yourself and not really get into that space of hopelessness, because this will also pass. But also, if you have the computer, you have online access to really spend time maybe exploring good stories, learning about the issues which are happening around the country. So see, it's okay to say ki, don't make a dam. But I think to understand what a dam does, you have time to right now do that. What is a rainforest? Why are people saying save this wetland? Or this patch of forest? Why are they saying ki, please don't make a road above this sanctuary? I think it's okay to be part of a movement, but it's more important to understand it deeply. So I think this time when you're in lockdown, to maybe pick up your phone, speak to people and understand it, go on Google and learn about it. There are a lot of short films on what does a dam do, what is a wetland. So it's a time for you to do a lot of research and a lot of stories, talk to the people around you. So I think that's the way, and that's how you can develop your proposals. Writing a proposal, writing a story takes a lot of time. So develop those proposals, write it down, look at samples, look at templates, and do that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rita and Krishnendu sir. Really thanks for your time and sharing lovely examples of your film and the kind of work that you're doing. It was really enriching experience. Sabyasachi, over to you.
Thank you, Aarti. Before concluding the session, I want to ask one question from you, because you were moderating, but I just want to know this from you. Like, is it really necessary to have, when you go for making a wildlife film, you need big lenses and very compact kind and very advanced camera. So how making film, a conservation film, is different from making a wildlife film? Like, if I'm a student or I'm having a simple camera with me, so is it possible for me to go outside and make a conservational film?
Krishan?
Well, I mean, that's some of it we were discussing in the last 1 hour, that you need a story. You can now film on an iPhone or a good phone. And the quality is good enough on a phone to make a film. I mean, there have been now fiction films, feature films, which are shot on iPhones. So wildlife, of course, would need certain sophisticated equipments and time and money and permissions. But conservation films, whatever the way we describe conservation films, we can go out and do it. I don't think you have to wait even for funding. If you have enough funds to travel a little bit and do your research, as Rita said, on your computer, talk to people, make your script. And filmmaking is also a kind of evolutionary project. It's not that today you go out, shoot, come back, edit the film, and it's ready. It grows on you. You keep shooting little bit, filming little bit, and then you make your story, and then you take an interview, and that opens up new doors. So then you go and meander and go back, and so you can easily start that process, I'm sure.
Rita ma'am, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think I agree with Krishnendu that it's really possible to, technology has totally changed. You can even edit on the computers now, phones now, so you can really make good impactful films. It's all about the story and how well you tell your story. And they also, you have these bridge cameras. You cannot make broadcast films, but you can definitely make films which are for online, for community screenings, for festivals. So yes, you even have these bridge cameras where the lens range is huge, from 21 mm to 1350 mm. They're not that expensive. So you can explore bridge cameras if you want to focus on wildlife alone that way. So a lot of things are available for you to start off as a new filmmaker.
Okay. Aarti, your view?
I go by what sir and ma'am is saying. You really need to have a good story. And I've always filmed with small cameras, and I have done a lot of filming. I've never used like big and massive lenses or something like that. I've always done that. It's basically, it's like you have to do it. First thing is that you really feel that is important, and you have to do it. That is something that is really important. And when you are very much thrilled about the concept and you're really wanting to make that film, then lenses and all these technical aspects really don't really matter that much. I think good film is something that we really need to focus on.
Yeah, really, thank you very much. Before concluding it, I have few announcements to make. Like, one announcement is regarding, I have so many inquiries regarding the certificate. So for the participants who are participating and expecting any certificate, they have to participate in 3 of the webinars, like this webinar and the next webinar, which is on the production of environmental and wildlife films. That is on June 20th from 4:30 p.m. And the third one is as all the panelists was talking about the story. The story, we need a very good story or a very good script. So on June 27th, we are having chapter 4 of this webinar series about how to write a successful script. It all starts and ends with this story. So the participants who will attend all these 3 webinars will be eligible for getting the e-certificate. So again, I want to express our sincere gratitude to Krishnendu sir, Rita ma'am, and Aarti for you to moderating the session. And I welcome. I really want to thank all the participants who are here with us on Zoom and on Facebook Live. And we will be putting this recording on our YouTube page soon. And we will be, as I already informed everyone, that we will be doing next webinar on production of environmental wildlife films, and the registration will open from Tuesday evening. So I hope to see you again in the upcoming webinar, and thank you again for attending. Thank you, Krishnendu sir. Thank you, Rita ma'am. Thank you, Aarti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Sabyasachi.
Bye.
Bye.